The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. You have been forewarned. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is a Patreon edition, $5 episode. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man with the crane technique for arguments, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hi, Tom.
Canvas, you like? JCPenney, $3.98.
I've been looking forward to this based on most especially based on our last talking of the Karate Kid series.
Yes.
Because you seem to think that Mr. Miyagi is the worst person in the world. And I would like to defend his honor tonight, sir.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead to our $10 episode, but I far prefer him to Mr. Han. At least he didn't. At least Mr. Miyagi didn't actively kill his own family. But
I thought the same thing.
But that's by the by. I was fascinated to see how this movie used Pat Morita's comic chops.
Yeah.
Like, firstly as
not just. Well, go ahead.
Well, firstly as misdirection. So he's like, to make out he's this ignorant buffoon before we realize he's a martial arts master, and
right.
Then with lines like the quotable I just picked.
And not just that, but you're talking the thing that I really started thinking a lot about and was reading a lot about in the IMDb notes was, he had to audition a couple of times because he speaks English. He doesn't, he is not a Japanese speaking man.
Yes.
And so he had to do 2 passes on his accent for this movie. And one of the things I realized was that when you take an American like Pat Morita, who ended up putting his Japanese name, they put his Japanese name in front of Pat because they wanted more connection to that heritage of himself. And just the idea that because he was immersed in American culture, that he was able to find sort of the perfect broken English mannerism of speak.
Yes.
To do exactly what you were saying, which was to lean into his comedic chops, but also make the character himself more endearing.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think they use his comedy persona to demystify some of the mythology surrounding, the East and martial arts.
Martial arts, yeah.
Which is interesting given that it's a movie set in the Valley that is so concerned with karate heritage. But it really does seem like it wants to distinguish itself from the kind of Bruce Lee or David Carradine versions of martial arts that we've seen in Western media. But again, in a movie, where there's a place called Golf and Stuff. It's a really strange it's a really strange approach.
This is the movie that made me think Golf and Stuff was the perfect date.
I didn't want to bring this up quite so early, but I really think they're burying the lead in Golf and Stuff, because the stuff part
stuff is more
it's a water park and an arcade, right? So fuck the golf. It was also
Perhaps being from England, you can't rely on how much the Gulf of Golf and Stuff was important to Americans. We love our miniature golf.
Yeah, maybe. And I should, and hailing originally from Scotland, I should as well. But I felt like they missed a marketing opportunity there by making it seem as if golf was the main attraction.
Right.
But it didn't. Did that place remind you of Poltergeist 3? and the idea of this kind of one-stop shop. You know,
No, I mean I
like
didn't make that connection.
this
It's
kind
a,
of
it's a different thing
80s
to me.
this
Yeah.
80s utopia of you know, you just go to one place for the entire evening and it'll take care of all of your wants and needs at once.
Yeah. We didn't have golf and stuff here, but we had what we called family fun centers.
And
And
boomers, right?
that's a different thing. That came later. So it's like
Sorry. That's boomers is totally different. No fun is had there.
you saw how easily I swatted away the
I
idea
know,
of
I know.
boomers.
It's like I gotta say, in the big scheme of things, boomers is similar to
You're not wrong.
and family fun centers.
I mean, and then boomers kind of turned into Dave and Buster's, so it keeps sort of turning into something else, but it's all sort of the same idea.
yeah.
But Golf and Stuff and Family Fun Center is, you know, hits me in my nostalgic 80s.
Well, when Ali first, recommends it for a date,
Hmm.
it was very confusing. I was like, is it like, does she mean the country club? Is that what she calls the country club? It's especially confusing because later on you actually do go to a country club.
Right.
So
All right. Well, let's get to it. Ladies
Yeah.
and gentlemen, this is your $5 Patreon episode. If you're listening to this, we love you.
Mhm.
Thank you. And
we should find a way to charge $3.98 for this, so that it's the same
Right.
price as Miyagi's
Yes.
belt.
I keep thinking, too, because we always do the first movie first.
Yeah.
And
Look at
it's
us,
almost
Mavericks.
always it's almost always the better of the two movies. So part of me thinks
Yeah.
that we should charge the $10 for the better movie.
I know what you mean, but I don't know some of the I think some of the pledges, and I'm not just saying this to get $5 more of your money, but I think one of the pleasures of this format is comparing the two. I mean, we're already talking about
I agree with you. Yeah, you're
the
right.
2010 version, and I have not to say that this won't be a great episode, but I think the next one will be highly entertaining.
I already have a bet with myself on that one
Yeah.
that you had not seen it.
Okay.
Reveal it later.
Yeah. Make them pay $5 for that information.
Exactly right. Well, this Karate Kid is a 1984 movie directed by our good friend John G. Avildsen. What can I say? Rocky 1 and Rocky 5, Karate Kids 1, 2, and 3. We've seen them before. Lean on Me, The Power of One, and 8 Seconds. John G. Avildsen.
Yeah, king of the sports movie in this. Well, a particular kind of sports movie.
Yeah,
think.
exactly. Because they're outskirts. You know, boxing
Yeah.
is the most mainstream thing he can manage. I mean, after that, you've got karate and bull riding on his resume.
The world of boxing wasn't fringe enough for him.
Yeah,
That's why he
exactly.
had to go back to street fighting in Rocky 5.
Exactly.
It was all getting far too mainstream, having boxing in rings.
Well, this is obviously this is a much beloved movie. 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. It had a budget of $8 million and just 8 million. Wow. And then an opening weekend of 5 million, but in the USA and the world, $91 million. And as we know, spawned 3 sequels and now a television series.
And a significant
It's
television
IP.
series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, three sequels, a reboot, and then a television series.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And a television series that is one of the bedrocks of American television now.
Well, we're in lockstep on that.
And I think what I think is kind of amazing about the book because Karate Kid and Cobra Kai are now the two bookends of the franchise.
Right.
And it puts the franchise in a place for me where I can watch the Karate Kid through the lens of Cobra Kai and it's a better movie, and I can watch
Yes,
Cobra
exactly.
Kai through the lens of Karate Kid, and it's a better TV series.
Yeah.
They're so complementary. Everything that you don't get in Karate Kid, you get in Cobra Kai, and vice versa. But they don't step on each other's toes either.
Yeah, I agree. And there was a specific line in this one that to me made Cobra Kai all the more poignant. I mean, it's coming up soon, so I'll save it. But it has to do with Johnny Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't believe the line when I heard it.
I think
Well,
I
I'll
know
just
what
go.
you. Yeah, I think is it ex degenerate
Yeah,
Johnny Lawrence? He's called an ex degenerate, that is some amazing foresight to call a teenage boy what he will turn out to be as a middle-aged man.
exactly. I did. That was the line that he. It started with ex degenerate, but when he starts talking about, I'm an ex degenerate and I have 1 year to make it all work.
Yeah.
So it's like for this character, this year was going to be the most important year in his life,
Right.
and everything got turned on its head for him. And to me, that makes Cobra Kai all the more better. I mean, I just couldn't
Yeah.
believe it when I heard him talking about that.
Well, like the next time, essentially the next time you catch up with him, if you discount the opening of Karate Kid Part 2, which is, because it's a John G. Avildsen film, it's the same night,
Yes.
as the end of Karate Kid. But the next time we catch up with him, he's still trying to live down what
That
happened that
kick,
year. He
that one
can't
kick,
escape
yeah.
it. So yeah, there's so many examples here where the Karate Kid leaves just enough room for Cobra Kai to take on an idea and run with it,
Yeah.
and that's so interesting. I mean, most franchises don't get the luxury of having a series like Cobra Kai to
Hmm.
do that with. But anything that you're lacking in Karate Kid, you get in Cobra Kai, and vice versa. I
Yeah.
think they're
Well,
interdependent in a really in a way that most franchises just don't hang together this well.
hmm.
And this one certainly shouldn't, because everything in between
Right,
that is
right, right.
terrible.
Yeah. No, I seem to recall you quite liked Karate Kid 3.
Yes, I did, but again, I mean, I enjoyed it, but
You still
it's
recognize it as
I
terrible?
recognize, yeah, I recognize that I think I said it's a good movie, but
Yeah, you did.
more
You
enjoyable than
monster.
good.
All right, fine.
That is definitely a movie that improves upon watching it through the lens of Cobra Kai.
Oh, definitely. And this is the last thing I'll say about Cobra Kai too.
No,
That's
it's not.
You're right.
Don't
But
make that promise to the listeners.
but I think it's important to point out, from 2 on, except for you, the sequels get more and more derided.
Yes.
They are thought of in the public consciousness as getting worse and worse and worse. And yet they all raise their level through the lens of Cobra Kai. And that's the magic of Cobra Kai. That's what I just love that series is able to do that
And
in a way
fluidly as
that
well.
I can't think of another piece of filmmaking or television that is able to do that in the same way that show can. It's
Not
fantastic.
it's not a direct analogy, but to me it feels like the relationship between Goodfellas and The Sopranos.
Hmm.
Like, even though they're not in a shared storytelling universe, one is playing off the other in a way that they both grow exponentially if you know both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what Cobra Kai did for Karate Kid. But that's not to say that it works from the other side as well. Karate Kid had to be something incredible in and of itself
Mm-hmm.
to be a springboard for Cobra Kai.
And the other movies, whether they were good, bad, or somewhere in between.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more going on in this movie than in any of the sequels.
Oh, so much more.
I mean, that really struck me upon this viewing, how layered this movie is.
Okay, I'm glad you saw. I'm glad, yeah, because I had the same experience watching it.
There's from the first shot of the movie, it's thematically trying to say so much. It's it's trying to tell a story that's bigger than it seems like on the surface.
Absolutely. There's a moment more than halfway through the film, that was so nuanced. I almost couldn't believe it.
Oh, I have a ton of those as well. A ton of those examples. Really insightful film writing and direction and acting.
Yeah. That's one of my other notes. Yeah. Actually, specifically, well, you're right about the writing and directing, but I really noticed why all these actors are still in our lives today.
100%.
Through watching this movie, because the three main leads, or teenage leads at least, through Elizabeth Shue, Ralph Macchio, and William Zabka, they are just bringing it in every single moment of this movie. It's really, it's so much fun to watch. Great acting from young actors.
Yeah, completely.
All right. Well, let's start.
All right.
Because my first note is how giddy I got once again just seeing something like the old school Columbia logo.
And this is exactly what I was talking about when I said on a previous episode. I think it was maybe the Spider-Man Patreons we did, because those were Columbia movies.
Yeah.
The 1980s Columbia Pictures logo looks like the expensive ornament at your grandparents' house. This is what I was talking about.
That's
the one they kind of barricade it behind the good china, so there's no chance that you can. It's like you're
accidentally knock it off the tree.
You're gonna break all of that before you even get there. It's like the idol in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like you're not gonna get there unless you smash up everything.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I said it gave me the warm and fuzzies.
Oh, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to open a movie. I was struck by the fact that there's a time and place setting before the movie begins.
Yeah, I didn't remember that either.
I did not remember that, especially as literally seconds of this movie take place
in Newark,
in the location that they establish in the opening shot.
Exactly.
But what's kind of interesting about that to me is that it's obviously important to Avildsen as a director that we start here.
I think it's important to him, but I also, and I think I agree with him, I think he thinks it's important for the characters, and specifically for Daniel.
Yeah.
To see where he comes from and where he's going to.
Except we don't see where he comes from. Like he's leaving as we,
Yeah, but at the very least, over credits, you are going to see the stark contrast between New Jersey and them driving cross country. We're obviously seeing Arizona at some point, so you're seeing the high desert mountains and the culture shock that it would be for that character.
I think it's that. I think it's it's Avildsen as well, sort of wanting to, showing that he's transitioning from the East Coast settings of Rocky. But we're back in that milieu, that urban, industrial, working class milieu, which is his his happy place as a director.
Maybe.
And so in a sense this is it's like we're transitioning from the end of Rocky almost.
That's interesting. Yeah,
we're gonna tell a different story. But look, straight away,
I mean, do you feel like is it that he feels like he has to do that as a director?
Oh, but
do you think he's conscious enough to say, people know me from Rocky and they're going to think this is a Rocky movie with feet, and I'm going to show them that it's more than that?
Yeah, I think that, but also what you said about setting up the kind of
Mm-hmm.
the conflicts and tensions of the story,
Yeah.
which is a great deal of which is about culture shock. And something that's also clear in this opening for me is that Avildsen sees it as a modern day frontier story, because the way he films that journey from
Yeah.
New Jersey to California, we go through Monument Valley. The
Mm-hmm.
music that Bill Conti does is specifically a John Ford Western soundtrack.
I think some of those. I think one of those stops, this where they and also just the economy of storytelling they have, where over the credits you're watching them push the car to try and jumpstart it.
Yeah.
Which will come back in a character way later, I think is a little masterstroke of brilliance. But I think that place they stopped at was a famous filming place for Westerns.
Yeah,
in the 40s and 50s.
And I definitely think that's a choice. I think they're being portrayed as modern day pioneers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all done visually.
Yes, right.
Which I think is terrific. And and he also, he establishes the style of the movie in this opening as well. You get the lens flare, the location shooting that's photorealistic, cameras off balance, this pseudo documentary aesthetic which we associate with Rocky as well. But he kind of puts his signature on it right away, and it just kind of makes it a really striking opening that completely sets up the movie for us, both in terms of story and theme.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's, and as you said, done very economically and entirely visually. We never have to go into the car and have any dialogue between them.
No conversations between mom and son.
Yeah. So I think it's beautiful, and when they arrive at their destination, it really spoke to me as someone who in their lifetime has emigrated to California.
Yeah.
Because the way that it looks both exotic and sketchy at the same time.
Right.
That's exactly how I remember seeing moving to California and seeing it for the first time. Like not just as a kind of playground for a tourist, but it's like I'm going to be living, like you're looking around going, this is unreal. This is like fantasy made real. On the other hand, that guy looks a bit dodgy.
Sketchy.
I maybe need to get off this street.
I have to keep a distance.
And I haven't felt that since I first moved here, and this reminded me of that, because Daniel's in a similar situation that I was, and Avildsen really finds that.
Well, it's funny too, because he's coming from New Jersey. And New York and New Jersey, I think a Californian would think of those places as sketchy.
Right.
And so that's what's the sort of role reversal of that, I think, is pretty fantastic.
And then if the first person he runs into is a native New Jerseyan.
Yeah, right. Well, the second, because the first person is a person he almost knocks unconscious by kicking the wooden door, and he befriends Freddy. And it's funny because both this and 2010 have a character that waltz into the story and then leave it and never come back.
Yeah, but this character belongs in this place in a way
that's true.
The next movie simply does not belong. Yeah, I mean this is Marble Rye Lady from Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
Who's kind of sitting in the apartment complex, and she's sort of, she's like 2-3 generations back. She was the kind of East Coast pioneer in her era. Exactly. I mean, it's so, like you don't have to think about it like that, but it enriches it if you do.
I think it enriches it even if you don't, because I think it's one of those things that it's sort of coded. So even if you don't consciously have the thought, you have the feeling.
Yeah, and again, we never see her again
right.
in the movie either. So clearly she's there for a reason. I mean, everything is there for a reason, but she's there for a specific reason, because she's not going to factor into the story in any way. But I like that idea of like sort of Daniel sees the journey he's just made
Yeah, and
in another person.
And because right now is my, a line that I wrote down in my notes was the entire movie is easily coded.
Yeah.
It's like an old Western. The good
It
guys, the
really,
bad
you're
guys.
so right. You're so
Yeah.
right. That is the thing to know about this movie. It's visually and conceptually broad,
Mm-hmm.
but the acting, the writing, and the direction within that is not subtle and nuanced.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
kind of all you need to know about this movie. Is you're going to get rich versus poor. You're going to get
Right,
black versus
exactly. Yeah,
blonde.
yeah, yeah.
You're going to get tall versus short. That
Mm-hmm.
these like social class racial distinctions are going to be really amplified to the point where there's an Italian kid covered in spaghetti at one point,
Right.
right?
Exactly right.
But
Yeah.
but no one is playing. It's not cartoonish in execution.
Well, but not just within that, because there is something within this movie that I don't think I ever really realized it until this viewing. The one thing this movie seems to me to do so well, because there's so much of it that's naturalistic, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
through the lens of the camera, through Avildsen and his directing, through performances,
Yeah.
and yet it's heightened. It has the feel of melodrama.
Mm-hmm. That's such a tightrope to walk.
That's such a tightrope, and it does it
probably
so
why
well.
And probably explains why they couldn't do it again.
And I was going to say that you only realize how well they do it once you watch the second movie.
Yeah.
By the second movie, I mean 2010.
Oh,
Because
okay. Well,
that movie can't do it.
that movie can't do it, and I'd include the sequels in there. They go off in
You're right.
in one direction. The Karate Kid Part 2 is kind of too naturalistic, too slow and storyless.
And 3 is very melodramatic.
And three is Victorian melodrama with a mustache twiddling villain.
Right.
Mr. Stingely from Rent 2.
Yes.
That is Rent 2 only exists in The Simpsons, unfortunately. Yeah, and added to that, the way that Avildsen directs actors, or the way that he works with actors, he it's a kind of like a loose, natural style, because you can draw a direct line from Stallone as Rocky to Ralph Macchio as Daniel. Demographically they're very similar characters, apart from age, but they're sort of like, you can see the same. You can imagine the same kind of directorial style through these two actors.
Sure.
Just keep it all very loose and natural. Lots of off the cuff comments here and there. Don't make it sound like it's scripted.
Right.
Actors constantly moving, doing business, and it's really interesting how Daniel kind of takes on that mantle.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It's when you're introducing all these new characters, it lifts everything.
And I read something.
It makes it seem so fluid. Like he's like he's like a kind of maitre d', just kind of like, hey, who are you? Oh, nice to see you. I go,
right.
Hey, you know. It's like, it just makes it all so easily go down.
Yeah, I have a direct example that speaks to exactly what you're saying, because I was reading about, Ralph Macchio. I think he was 22 when he made this movie. And nobody believed he was 22. They all thought he was like 16 or something like that. Mm-hmm. They would ask to see ID. But he himself didn't like the idea of product placement. And there's a scene where he's drinking a Sprite with Mr. Miyagi, and he kept covering the logo of the Sprite. And they said, you can't do that. And so he finally...
This is an 80s movie, kid. We don't roll that way.
He finally uncovered it for just long enough for them to leave him alone.
Yeah.
And yet, within the moment, it all seems very natural and laid back and like just a kid drinking a soda. And
Absolutely.
So I have to think it speaks to exactly what you're talking about with John G. Avildsen talking to his actor. I understand you feel this way. There's this, and that, but we have this responsibility. So do this. And just,
also, and you brought up the aging down, because Elizabeth Shue is 21
18,
or 20.
I think.
Oh, okay. I thought she was even
Oh no,
older
wait,
than that.
no. She was older. I think it's Zabka that was 18 at the time. He was the only true teenager. So I think
Yeah,
she
I
was
think
20.
yeah, and she's she's playing a little down from that, but I was really struck, and we'll talk about Elizabeth Shue in more detail later. But just to say, I was struck by
God, I hope so.
exactly the same. And she know, and I know why. No, she's just
I think she's the first actor I ever truly fell in love with in a movie.
if I'd have seen, I mean, I'd have been one at the time, but or two at the time, so might have been a bit premature. But I had this,
You take the cigar out of your mouth and lean over. Pretty
yeah,
hot,
had this
don't you
been a
think?
formative movie for me, I mean, I fell in love with her even watching
Yeah,
it this time. And she's able to convincingly play a teenager while suggesting maturity beyond her years,
right.
beyond even the years of a 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's playing the part more maturely than you expect a 20-year-old to, but she's also aging down
And believable.
and believable. And Ralph
Yeah.
Macchio's Daniel is doing the same thing as
Doing
well,
the same thing, right.
because he's got adult qualities that are beyond the years of even the actor.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also got to play down to the teenager, and again, a real tightrope.
And when he does it, it's brilliant.
It could just be grotesque if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And and both of them, I think, pull that off, and especially in their scenes together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're playing off that style really well.
Well, and I'll go to John G. Avildsen again, because the moment they see each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he is able to make all of us fall in love with her the same way Daniel is, just based on how he shoots it.
And
I mean, a lot of that has to do with her too, like her just
Yeah.
natural effervescence
No, it's
sitting on that beach. But
it's definitely it's
it's a
such
team
good,
effort through Ralph
Yeah.
Macchio, through Avildsen, through herself.
It's
Like everybody's working on the same level to make us, the audience, fall in love with this character. It's like she's the one.
I'll even give the slow motion a pass. It's that good, because it's so obvious. This is the thing, like I have historically disliked slow motion, but if it's
Mhm.
appropriate,
I'll say.
if it's an appropriate device in the movie, I think it's perfectly justifiable. And here's a great example of that. It's obviously Daniel's point of view that we're seeing.
Yeah, right.
So it makes sense that you would slow it down. You would slow the film down at that point. So it's it even wins me. It even wins a slow motion skeptic over. But again, like I'm just struck by how simultaneously obvious and subtle this movie is at the same time. I mean, there's it's boys on the beach listening to the Beach Boys.
Sure.
That's as on the nose as you can get, but it's perfect. It's just perfectly done, and almost immediately. So we've kind of introduced the regional distinctions between the characters. We've seen Daniel's journey from New Jersey, so we know he's an outsider in a regional sense. And then immediately,
but again, economy, because it's Freddy that just says from the hills, and that's all we need to know about Allie.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, they're the what are the families in the Bonanza called? It's like they're the Hatfields, we're the McCoys.
The Hatfields, McCoys, yeah, right.
To go back to your Western analogy, but they're introducing this. We've got regional distinctions between the characters, then we've got the social class divisions between the characters, and they're sharply drawn early on.
Yeah.
So that the canvas,
and yet it's still Romeo and Juliet, right? It's still Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, I mean it's age old, timeless storytelling, but yet very specific to this place in this time with these people. And being able to manage both simultaneously is just an incredible achievement.
Right, and because it's never going to truly be the parents standing in front of these kids saying you can't be together. it's going to be all, it's wrapped up more in their 80s culture.
They're clearly not Beijing parents then.
Yeah, exactly. But it's going to be them standing in their own way because of what they're going through in their own lives. So what makes them stop? What makes them not walk down the hallway towards them? What makes them not talk to each other until they feel like they have to? So it's one of those things that, again, it's like a black hole just sucks you in to this couple and their romance. It's great.
It is great. And then we're introduced to Cobra Kai and, Johnny Lawrence, who is the sort of Jack Palance figure of this. I'm trying to make your Western analogy work.
Don't feel like you have to.
No, okay. He's kind of set up as the heel very clearly. But what strikes me in terms of Zabka's performance is it reminds me he always played Johnny with a fierce intelligence. You always felt there was more behind this character than he was being allowed to do within the confines of his archetype, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be the bad boy. He's got to be the heel, and yet, the seams keep showing again and again that he is multi-dimensional. We're just not. Yeah. It's just because of the situation we can't see it yet. And then comes along Cobra Kai, and then it's just like 5 seasons of television. Explore the very idea that you're left with at the end of this movie, that there's more to Johnny Lawrence than we thought there was from watching the movie.
Sure.
Which is why they work so well together. And then,
but there are little scenes peppered in this movie where they do see them at golf and stuff, and he's in his own car, and all the friends are with him, and he's showing no anger towards Daniel. It's just like, hey, you want to come with us? Get in the car, Allie.
Exactly. I mean, there's the scene in the country club where he's sucking up to the parents. There's of course the kind of redemption in the final scene where his reaction to Kreese saying no mercy, his reaction to Daniel's win. So clearly, they're trying to maintain the archetype that he is part of the villainy of this. And yet they're leaving room for it to be a little more nuanced and complex here and there. And out of that, they built a TV series, basically.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's wonderful. And it has to be William Zabka. It has to be someone as on top of their performance as William Zabka to...
yes, he is, yeah.
And, we're like 5 minutes into the movie. Karate. We talked about this when we did the sequels. We have to wait so long to get any karate. And this movie is just kind of like gently sprinkling karate across
throughout.
Yeah. Like, why is this so hard? It's like literally, a few karate kicks at this point. But, the movie's called Karate Kid. It's like, oh, there's the first karate in Karate Kid.
Right.
So I just don't understand why they don't think of doing this again. And I know it's an unfair comparison because Cobra Kai is a TV series, but it feels like Cobra Kai understands this as well. Like, it can't just be like one episode at the end where all the karate is done.
Happens.
It has to be sort of like sporadically appearing throughout for the genre that you're in.
Sure. Well, should we take a fake break?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
We'll have 2 or 15 minutes to return.
Right.
Depending on which version of the Karate Kid you want to talk about.
But you all listening are the best around. We'll be right back. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, and we're talking the original Karate Kid.
Nothing's ever going to keep us down.
No. Not while we're talking about this film. And so, bottom line, I think for both of us is obvious. Like, this movie just holds up.
It's interesting for me because this is a movie that I don't remember sitting down and watching from beginning to end many times in my life. I can remember catching it on TV and watching it as kind of a strip where I'd see certain, certain
parts.
scenes again and again, or just see it in fragments. So sitting down and watching it as a coherent piece of art, not for the first time, but not many previous viewings. The artfulness of it really struck me. Like it's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly it's a great piece of entertainment as well.
Yeah.
It's a whiz bang sports movie. It works on that level, but there's so much more going on, and it's a character piece.
Yeah, that's what. So I think that's part of the magic potion for this movie. I think John G. Avildsen really layered this movie in a way. We ask ourselves often, why is a movie good? This movie has something to offer everyone, and I think that's part of it. If you're just looking for the sports part of this movie, you're going to get that. If you care more beyond sports, you're going to get that. If you want, something, if you study film, I think you'll find something beyond that.
Well,
there is nuance within this movie, and there are layers that make it interesting.
Speaking to that very point, like as a martial arts movie, I think this is a significant moment in the genre. Because martial arts has been gradually breaking through in Western cinema since the mid 60s, the first kind of considered in the first supposedly official instance of martial arts in an American movie is Bad Day in Black Rock, Spencer Tracy movie, where he does some kung fu on his adversary. So that's 65. Now it's kind of mainstream to the point where it's in a high school movie now.
Yeah, right.
Like we can graft it onto that Hollywood movie genre. So
we can mix it with Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Breakfast Club,
and that's clearly what's going on here. And
right.
And I don't think it had been attempted before, and there's probably a lot of instances of it since.
Yeah. So after that beach scene, he has to go to high school. I made a note that there's a sign. There's a plaque on the school that says truth, liberty, and toleration. And I wrote, these people don't know what high school's like.
Nor do they.
None of that's going on.
Nor do they understand the English language. I don't think toleration is a word, is it? Isn't it tolerance?
I think you're right.
Here's a question I have for you, and you might be able to answer it. Being someone who were you around the same age as Daniel when this came? Were you a teenager when this came out?
Yeah.
Why soccer and not American football? Was there a soccer boom in this period? Was it just so that you could have women and men playing together on the?
No, yeah, I don't. Fair question. But the funny thing is to this day I'll watch soccer if it's the World Cup, but I've never been as big a fan of soccer as I am of other sports. But it's funny that you brought that up because I never thought of that myself. I never thought, why soccer? Why aren't you playing something I like football? Like the character plays soccer, whatever,
Yeah.
So,
and I know it's more of a co-ed sport in America, but that still doesn't really explain why this is the only game we see them play apart from karate, if you want to call that a game, but at some level it is. We've already been introduced to Mr. Miyagi. We see him trying to catch flies with a chopstick.
Yeah,
earlier on in the movie. And then...
Can I take a moment just to say, because you said we've already met Mr. Miyagi, and once again, you and I are watching a 1980s movie, and generally speaking, I think the 80s are pretty derided as a decade for movies.
You're probably right.
And yet I'm watching another 1980s movie in which 23 minutes in, I write down, this script is, got a clockwork aspect to it because I've met all the characters I need to meet. I know the essential essence of who they are, and I know where, I have, like I said, the movie's coded, so I have a code map for where this movie is going to go. I don't know everything that's going to happen in the movie, but I know who's who and what's what, and I have a general, I'm pointing north. I have a place to go.
Yeah, it's set out its stalls very early on.
Yeah.
For the rest of the movie, and
but we keep coming back to this again and again for movies from the 80s. So
I mean, I don't want to sound like an old man yelling at a cloud, but I think there was a greater respect for the classical art of storytelling in this period, where these being a movie that establishes story and setting still has a kind of premium it doesn't have now in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
You also know it's a movie from the 80s because Miyagi is introduced like a human Yoda.
Yeah.
Like it's exactly the same as Yoda's introduction in Empire Strikes Back. He's playing this buffoonish like character before he reveals that he is a master of martial arts.
Right.
So, and then of course, like to your point about the way that the tensions and conflicts are so well established, as soon as we've kind of met Miyagi and we know what he's about, we're going to meet Kreese.
Yeah.
And,
I want to say I talked about this in a previous episode because, again, it's the economy of storytelling, this idea that, in the sequels, that's one of the things I love about Cobra Kai. In the sequels, these characters are making just batshit crazy choices.
It's revealed that many of them are on coke.
Yeah, the show manages to sum up by just saying they were on cocaine, which is brilliant. But
best explanation you've ever heard.
That's so amazing
for a bad 80s sequel character behavior. Yeah, cocaine. Let's move on.
When we're introduced to Kreese, we're gonna watch Daniel walk into his dojo, and he's gonna look at a picture on the wall, and it's Kreese in the army.
Yeah.
The guy was in Vietnam. We have all the information we need, basically from Rambo, what it was like to be in Vietnam. And so all of a sudden we have an explanation for why this guy is like he is. And again, like you said, never talked about. There's no dialogue about it. It's just all coded. It's all just like with one shot, Avildsen, he tells us everything we need to know about this character and why he's doing what he's doing.
And without him...
Fucking love it.
Without him ever talking about it, we also understand the Cobra Kai method of karate.
Yeah, right.
It's Reaganized karate, right?
It's absolutely.
It's been militarized,
right?
And it also encourages greed and inequality. So it's sort of saying that if you're 5-on-1, that's okay. Don't worry about fairness. If there's more of you than them, that's just the way of the world. That's just nature.
They're probably taking up a collection for the Contras.
Exactly. And economy of visual storytelling once again. The amazing one shot where Daniel's in the restaurant where his mother works.
Yeah.
And we see in the same shot through the glass window, Cobra Kai in the background, realizing it's him. And, doing the
kid running away to go get the other guys.
Yeah, it's like they do their 80s kids, 80s person, evil
their
person
henchman
scheming.
Plan.
Yeah. But this is all done in one continuous shot. Utilizing foreground and background to the fullest. By the way, at this point, we haven't spoken about Daniel's mother. She's already changed jobs.
She lost her job.
And that is such a John G. Avildsen touch.
I don't think I ever realized that really consciously.
Yeah.
Until I watched it for this episode,
Yeah. Well, she was working for Rocket's Computers.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So, you know, she got...
And I think there was supposed to be a scene, I don't know if they ever filmed it. I think they did film it, but cut it out. That she was walking past that restaurant and somebody came out. Well, I quit. And she's like, well, I could get a job here.
Yeah, I mean...
kind of waltzed in and got the job.
And that's the great part, is that you get the information across, but you don't actually need to see a scene in which this happens.
Right, exactly.
And added to that is John G. Avildsen's, you know, he's got this thing about, you know, all his characters need to be put through some kind of socioeconomic ringer.
Yeah, through the ringer. Yeah. Exactly.
And this has all happened off screen, thankfully. But we've got the same thing here, where it's like, you know, it makes more narrative sense for the mother just to keep the same job. But
you have expect to hear
sacrifices the realism in some respects.
Yeah. You have expect to hear Paulie say, "Well, I thought those computers were gonna be great. It's not my fault," and burst out the door.
Yeah, but you know, again, it's that balance that this movie has to be able to sort of pay that amount of attention to these socially realist details, and yet be economical enough to go, this doesn't need to be on screen. We just need to make it clear that it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't affect the overall story. She's gone from one job to another, and she even talks about this being a better job, a better opportunity. And you know, obviously we know what's going to happen with the tech wave. So I just think it's a really interesting touch, handled in a way that doesn't jumble anything up, and Avildsen didn't learn his lesson here, because in the next couple of films it's full of moments like this, but they're like a bigger part of the film,
of the storyline.
This is just good background,
right? Well, and speaking of background, it's funny because, you know, in the next scene, of course, Daniel is riding his bike home and gets pushed off a cliff.
Right.
So he tumbles and he's injured, and he's got, you know, road rash across his forehead.
Yeah.
And when we see him next, he's, you know, it's one of those moments where he is having a perfect high school angry kid freak out.
Yeah.
At his bike. He's, you know, I hate this bike. I hate this fucking bike. And he's throwing it away in the trash, and he has this huge, great fight between he and his mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't want to reveal too much about 2010 yet, but, you know, there's lots of identical scenes between these two movies. And every single time they choose to do that, the 84 scene is a better scene.
Yeah. Well, I think there's specific reasons for that, which we'll get into in the next.
Yeah, but I think it has to do with script, with Avildsen, and even with the actors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all working in a way in which, you know, basically it's for the button. It's it's all working towards Miyagi just walking out the door.
Mm-hmm. Eavesdropping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But us kind of getting
like a total creep.
But you never get that sense of a creep vibe. You know what I mean? It's
no.
So because we know by the next morning he's going to fix that bike and lay it out for Daniel. You know what it is this offering, this gesture of friendship.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in 2010, and the fight's similar, but that part of it is absent, and that's one of the reasons it doesn't work. But
there's also a great line in this scene that really stood out to me, where Daniel says, "I don't understand the rules here, and I want to go home."
Yeah.
And it reminded me, it's like, oh, this is a movie about outsiders.
Yeah.
About people who were excluded from the society that they live in. They're excluded from their surroundings.
Well, not just that, because that line stuck out to me, but so did the fairness aspect of that line, where he says, "Oh, like it was really fair that you didn't ask me what I thought about coming here." And I just love that the actor, that his mom takes the moment to like take in what he says, and there's a pause, and she says, "You're right."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's from a 1980s movie. And 1980s movies, that represent parents, and our parents were always kind of the parents that said, because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see a parent that would say that, like, listen to their child and said, you're right, and I am sorry, and then kind of walk away in each other's arms, like, her arm around him, and like, it's going to get better. It'll be okay. I'm your mom. I'm here.
I mean, it's like at a time when the idea of permissive parenting is getting a bad rap in the media, and it's been weaponized by Reagan to attack, the welfare class. It's really interesting that here we see the positive benefits of permissive parenting.
Yeah.
Of that sort of, it's kind of a cliche now of, the parents used to let their children just run wild and
Right.
be outdoors all day, and modern parenting wouldn't dream of doing that. It's based on the helicopter principle of constantly monitoring, hovering over your child. And so I love that here's an 80s movie that's sort of kind of fighting back against that rhetoric a little bit, and sort of saying, it's like, just because this is a hands-off parent doesn't mean they're any less capable.
Right.
And that also helps you swallow the pill of how much this mother just lets Daniel go off with this small middle-aged Japanese man who they've just met.
obviously once Miyagi gets more involved in the story, we'll talk about the 80s sort of fetishness with young teenage boys being the friends of middle-aged men, which we've encountered before with the Back to the Future series.
That's right, same year as well. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the next year, 85.
This was a stellar year for intergenerational friendships.
Yeah. So there's something in the water, as they say, in regards to that line of storytelling. But what I was gonna say was, growing up as one of those kids that, say, in the summer, you could leave the house at 9-10 a.m. and not come back until the sun was setting, and that was kind of the rule.
Yeah.
Like, be back when the sun sets, or be
like
back for dinner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it is sort of interesting. Like, she's an absentee parent, but it doesn't have the negative connotations of some of the other movies of this period, like, the Halloween movies, where the parents just abandon their children to their death
every Halloween until they're finally dead.
And it's interesting you brought up about, like, everyone has like an acting challenge. They have to play something they're not, whether that's in terms of age, and what you said about Pat Morita being like a fluent English speaking person, having to think how someone who wasn't a fluent English speaker would speak. But Miyagi's, and that leads to a lot of clipped dialogue and a lot of one-word answers. And that the dialogue is there to show that English isn't his first language, but you're also like, nothing's missing.
No, exactly.
All dialogue potentially could be this if you wanted it to be.
Right.
It would communicate the same message.
Sure.
And even though, obviously, like, even though they're working against it, Miyagi's still surrounded by a certain Eastern mysticism. That stereotype is still there, but it's extremely.
But it's also disarmed.
It's disarmed
because of who he is, because of the character himself, because he's so charming, because he's funny, because, I don't know, there's just lots of inherent qualities within Miyagi that disarm that fairly easily, I think, too.
And how many times before this movie have we seen an interracial surrogate parent?
Yeah, right.
And and of Japanese descent, Japanese people, Japanese community being one of the most derided ethnicities in Hollywood cinema since World War II.
Of course.
And this is, it's 4 decades later, but that racism is still there. It's even referred to in this movie.
Well, that's one of the things about this movie, too, because, we got to a certain point in the movie where I thought I couldn't remember. It'd been, I don't know how long it's been since I last saw it, but not, it had been long enough that I forgot all about Darkman's Larry Drake, because right when I got to the point where I thought there's not a scene in which Miyagi has to take on racism in a terrible, terrible way, and then the moment happened. Right then it literally happened.
They even call him, they call him Mr. Moto. I mean, so that's like directly referring back to Hollywood's misrepresentation of Japanese people. So I do think that this film has a point to make about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on in the movie, what it does with the issue of internment, I mean, you're not only like, you look back at it now and you're not even thinking, oh, that must have been progressive for the times. 10-15 years later, America's still grappling with the same question. It's 10 years after this that Clinton makes the first ever public apology for what happened to the Japanese during World War II. So this is not progressive for the times. This is a breakthrough moment of representation.
And it goes beyond, because the character was in internment camps, but he was also in the military.
Exactly.
And if you know enough about the squadron that he was in, it's literally the most decorated squadron in the history of the military, I believe.
I've seen the next Karate Kid, okay? You don't have to explain it to me. I actually figured it out from this movie without being told that as well.
Yeah, right.
No,
but I'm just saying, like, they're taking care. They're being very conscious about what they're doing with this character, I think.
In that scene, and we can talk about it in more detail later, but that scene to me is like, it's critical race theory in a piece of pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's what, crazy conservatives are so afraid of.
Right.
Like, someone actually in a big Hollywood movie standing up and saying, hey, what we did then was shitty.
Mm-hmm. Right. It was wrong.
And you know what? Nobody died. The society didn't collapse. Mm-hmm. Everyone just left the theater knowing a little bit more about their own history.
No, yeah, exactly. Well, and now Daniel's going to go to the Halloween dance. I might note also, all the way back in 1984, watching him wear a Chargers jersey with the number 89, Wes Chandler, always made me very happy. I'm sure you could give a shit.
Well, but has that gone full circle now that they're an LA team again?
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
I would have thought that as a Chargers fan, that would have depressed you to see that. No?
Oh no. I mean, I've had my own journey with the San Diego Chargers becoming the Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay.
Where at first I thought fuck them, and then they drafted a receiver that was really good. So I remember saying to myself, "Yay!" And then I thought, fuck, I still care. So I still care about the Chargers.
So does Miyagi support the Chargers from LA, or like what's the? Does that mean
I don't know. Well, Daniel's wearing the shirt. I don't know what's possessing Daniel, a kid from New Jersey, to wear a Chargers jersey.
He's probably
you think he'd be wearing the Giants, but
probably Ralph Macchio's covering up some other hot, terrible product placement that's on his shirt.
Maybe
he just picked up whatever, just like the boom operator's Chargers jersey.
Yeah.
One of the kind of I think mostly this movie kind of grains against the Reagan mentality, very much so in terms of Cobra Kai, but it was kind of funny to me that the movie had these kind of 80s-isms of like smoking a joint is bad, bullying and drugs is bad, and I was just like, Nancy Reagan would like those aspects of the movie.
Right.
We also get the first Black Spider-Man in this scene.
Yeah.
Pipped Miles Morales to the post.
There you go.
By about 30, 40 years.
Hey, Johnny, what's up?
And then later on, Miyagi is called Spider-Man. Daniel calls him Spider-Man as well. After he does his, after he beats up Cobra Kai.
Well, and so I want to kind of talk about that whole thing from the John G. Avildsen side of it, because he is able to do things. And it's funny because I would have thought the music changed to change the tone.
Yeah.
But, Daniel, he puts the hose on Johnny. He starts running, and Allie's going to trip Johnny and all his cohorts onto the floor. And in that moment, it's the sort of, da 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 da, like, the hero is getting one over on the villain.
No one can be happy for that long in a John G. Avildsen movie.
Exactly. But what's remarkable is, Daniel gets outside the door, and it's all one shot, like a kind of a high crane shot of watching Daniel run away and watching all those guys chase him down the street. And it goes from exciting to dread.
Yeah.
Really quickly, like the sense of danger that Daniel is in.
Yeah.
And I always want him to get over that fence, and he just never does, And then, of course, Miyagi saves the day, but I want to point out, in contrast to what we're going to talk about next, he saves the day in about 15 seconds. Like, no longer than that. It's over in 15 seconds.
And again, keeps the flow of karate through the film.
Right where it should be.
Where it should be. It's also, I mean, at this point, and if you've never seen the film before, and if you didn't start by watching the sequels, as only we did, this is a plot twist, right? We don't know that Miyagi's capable of this.
Well, I think we know, or we have the sense of it, but Daniel definitely doesn't know.
Well, yeah, I think the audience still at this point.
I mean, you probably walk into the theater knowing it.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess if you've seen Empire Strikes Back, you know where it's going.
Right.
It also struck me that it's necessary narrative information, because if you didn't reveal that Miyagi knew karate at this point, then everything he does in his training from this point onwards, you would just assume it's a con man looking for cheap labor.
Well, you would.
No, but right, if you don't have if you don't demonstrate that he can actually do karate, like about 10 minutes into the training, you'd be like, wait a minute, is this guy just
what the fuck is going on here?
to paint his fence and wash his cars? And this is when he gets Daniel back to the I don't know what you call it, his boiler, his non Freddy Krueger boiler room.
His not Freddy Krueger boiler room.
Another 1984 movie.
Yeah.
This is where he has the conversation where he tries to find out what Daniel knows about karate, and says you've been watching too much TV. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like it's really trying to give an authentic account of the history of karate in this movie. But at the same time, keeping distance from that. That's where you get the J.C. Penney belt line.
Right. So, and that's one of the things, that this movie does so well. The movie disarms you often through Miyagi.
Yeah.
As he's disarming Daniel.
Do you know what also struck me that was really powerful and just isn't the case, or isn't enough of the case in most movies about teachers and students, is it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Like, Daniel has to convince Miyagi to advocate for him.
So this is what I was just going to say, because
Daniel brings Miyagi out of his shell.
That aspect of it really surprised me in this viewing, because I didn't really exactly remember that. And I was just going to say that his initial turning him down was handled and executed in a way that, because again, at least from Miyagi's side, there's no dialogue speaking to it. He's just watching this kid angrily walk away from him and wonder, because, he's so angry in a teenage type way, like, you're abandoning me, fuck you, I'm leaving kind of way, that makes Miyagi change his mind. And so, to your point, it becomes this, it's the point where they come together. Yeah. Kind of as one, coach and student. And again, it was a really nuanced moment that I didn't expect from a movie that I knew was more nuanced than I think, people initially ever gave it credit for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's such a great, moment within that scene.
And speaking of nuances, I think it's great how Daniel pronounces the Italian G in Miyagi's name. He keeps calling him
Hmm.
Miyagi, and he keeps
Yeah.
correcting him. And that's just such a nice way to say that, there are cultural and ethnic differences between the two
Right.
without, you know,
But not a
hit.
judgment. Today,
No, not
today
not hitting you over.
would
Yeah,
Daniel would be getting messages on on social media talking about what a monster he is because he can't learn someone's name, as
but
opposed to
that's where Cobra Kai comes in and fills that vacuum
yeah,
because
right.
there's nothing in this movie, and why would there be? They wouldn't even probably entertain the notion that what Daniel is doing is cultural appropriation. But of course, you've got
Hmm.
that storyline in Cobra Kai where he puts Miyagi Do on YouTube. And of course, the
Right.
comments start coming in, and he gets cancelled on the basis of it.
Yeah.
So they left a space for that discussion elsewhere.
Right.
Uh, you can tell. I mean, you can tell that it's still the early 1980s. So we're still dealing with stereotypes of Asian driving. Um,
Yeah.
and well, it's kind of pan-immigrant driving, isn't it? Because it's sort of like neither Daniel nor Miyagi can drive, and to me that
Yeah, but
seems to
again,
be
it's
based on an old racist stereotype. I think.
yeah, again, the movie I think disarms you with that because of how charming Pat Morita is.
Yeah,
You
I don't
know.
know why he owns so many classic cars when he can't really drive.
Well, he could drive, I think. He just doesn't drive well, and he doesn't have a license.
There you go.
Why don't we take another fake break?
All right.
All right, we'll do that, and we'll come right back, everybody. Right after this. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here once again, finishing up with the Karate Kid. All right, where were we, Tom? Well, they're about to strike the deal, right? They're going to
Yep.
go to Cobra Kai, and
That's where we are.
they're going to strike a deal with Kreese and Johnny.
What really struck me about this scene again was the direction that long single take that Avildsen uses to show the combat.
Yeah.
In the Cobra Kai class, and that's why it's like it made me think this is in some aspects more of a 70s movie than an 80s movie. Like
We talk about that a lot.
we do,
But this is further down the line too, because this is we're approaching mid 80s.
I know, and yet it's. I mean, first of all, I think it's an overall good choice because when you film sports events, you want to get a sense of the live quality of them, and there's no better way of doing that by not cutting.
Right.
That's the easiest way to do it, and it's very, very effective here. You see the whole, you see the whole match in one shot, and without any editing, and
Right.
I think it's really good. But again, it has that grittiness of a 70s film, where
that was one of the things that surprised me about this movie because it has that kind of grainy quality.
Yeah.
The film itself of a late 70s movie.
And certainly the ideals of a director who was born out of the 70s.
Yeah, right.
But, also a very 80s subject matter and script.
Right.
But it works, it's I think if you tried to contemporize the look and feel of it, it would date much more than it has.
Maybe.
Kind of keeping it in I think movies from the 70s look far more timeless than movies from the 80s in terms of style.
Yeah.
And so this movie benefits from having a director who is not flashy, who doesn't edit for the sake of it, who doesn't want to kind of dress up the movie, even though it's a high school movie, essentially. He's not.
Yeah, right.
He's not leaning into that directorially, and I think that kind of solidity is what keeps us coming back to it in some respects.
Yeah. I like the button on that scene too when Miyagi says, "I just saved you 2 months of beating."
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a great, and again, it's very on the nose, the contrast between him and Kreese. They literally
Yeah, right.
could not be more different.
Right.
Whichever way you want to categorize it. But the fact this is the movie needs that. It needs it. You need to know who's on what side when.
Sure.
And
because at its heart, it's still a sports movie.
Like when that stuff works, it's magic.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And it works here.
Now, when we get into our next scene, is this your? Do you still have a big beef with Miyagi?
Oh, you mean the training?
Yeah, training.
No,
wax
I mean,
on, wax off,
yeah,
and sand,
yeah, I mean,
sand the floor.
I've got more to say about it in the context of the next movie, because I think the reboot does more harm in trying to address the child labor implications. I like the fact that we don't get into that, and it's sort of left as a subtext that can be explored later in
all right,
in Cobra
fine.
Kai. But
to me, it's pretty straightforward. It's muscle memory. He's teaching to do something that ends up helping him.
It's not the only activity that can build muscle memory. It's suspicious how every training technique involves manual labor that Miyagi is then spared.
Betters his home.
Yes, betters his home and spares
raises
him from
his
doing
property value.
Yeah. It's also, it makes out that this is the only way that these karate moves can be learned. I was like, there's literally hundreds of activities that you could teach him this method with.
See, but I think part of the magic of it too, and because the moment happens in the next film too, the one thing I do like about it is that it seems to take as long as it takes for the student to say, "This is bullshit, I'm fucking leaving," for the teacher to say, "Let me show you why it's not bullshit." And I think that's part of it. I think that defiance is part of it, and I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. I was surprised to see it kind of in the middle of it, the magic arm release. I'd completely forgotten about this. Like,
well, and I was just gonna say,
even in a supposedly authentic portrayal of what karate is, it sometimes still gets confused with just magic. And of course, this is laying the groundwork for the final scene that's what
I was gonna say. So it's like the car jump starting.
Yeah.
So it's a one single moment that you see before, but it's there for a specific reason, story-wise, later, and one's character-driven and one's narrative-driven.
Yeah,
I like that.
I so liked. I don't think it really. It doesn't kind of fit with the overall philosophy of what we're doing here. It's a magic shortcut. It's a Deus Ex Machina, but it's also it's sort of like predicated on our ignorance of karate, because you could turn around and go, well, who's to say you can't do this? That this isn't a technique that they use in the East. Maybe it comes from Okinawa. There's a moment later on in this movie which plays to that exact same tension.
The other thing I like about it is that you just spoke to the idea of the mysticism of karate, and this demystifies it. It's that idea of connecting it to something as simple as manual labor.
But that's what I mean in terms of it graining against, the magic arm release is sort of like, don't worry about that. That's just, that. You know how I said that it's not mystical? Well, this tiny bit is, because it's gonna pay off later.
Yeah, right.
So, but I think there are parts of this movie that are idealistic and utopian like that, and that's fine. No, I mean, I think it doesn't bump me at all, but when you break it down, it does stand out as kind of against the grain of what we're saying about karate for the rest of the movie.
All right, yeah.
But they're obviously.
I don't know that is the arm release karate though?
No, it's just a bit of, but it's not explained, so it's just like,
yeah,
it's
right.
just magic. It's just it's just a catalyst. And it's only being introduced now is because it's going to pay off narratively later.
Sure.
But it just stood out to me just because they are making such a big deal of trying to demystify karate, and this remystifies it for a minute, so that they can do the ending of the movie.
Very good, Dan. I think that for me, I guess I think of it.
It's not a criticism, but it's you. Yeah.
I guess I'm on the same page as you because it doesn't bump me at all.
But it's not consistent with the fabric of the movie as it's been established so far.
Yeah. To me, I always thought of it more as, an acupuncture kind of a...
But that's what I mean about the ignorance thing, isn't it? That's sort of like...
Yeah, right.
It's like, if you don't know how they do it, then they can literally do anything. Well, that can get you out of a lot of narrative rabbit holes.
Sure.
And then they're back at the beach.
Yeah.
Learning balance in the waves, making use of that California landscape once again. And as again, like using the landscape around you to kind of create the movie. And that's a message that Karate Kid 2010 did not get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everything is done in absence of in spite of where they are. This movie is about where they are and what that means and the landscape around them. That's part of the story.
Sure.
And I don't know, I would say the next movie, and maybe even reboots in general, treat the milieu that the film is set in as completely irrelevant to the story you're telling. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah. We'll talk about it later.
I thought there was a real missed opportunity here to scoop Star Wars Always a Bigger Fish. when Miyagi says someone always knows more.
Right.
I was just like, could have had him fishing, because he fishes it. We could have had him fishing and doing the bigger fish, but no, we had to wait for Phantom Menace for that.
Terrible line. We'll get to it.
And then go on. What are you?
I do. Well, I think earlier we brought up Larry Drake and the movie's one moment of clear racism in the film. But just as a little side note, I had to pause the film to figure out why I was seeing the current logo of the Washington Nationals hat for a team that did not exist in 1984. And then it turned out that there was the Washington Senators.
Wow. That
was a baseball team. And they had the exact same logo. But it really freaked me out for a second that this movie was being ever so prescient about a future baseball team. I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Yeah. I thought I fell into a wormhole.
Speaking of racism, Daniel is covered in spaghetti.
True.
No, and but you know what's
well, great? But that's a little later, because first we have the Golf and Stuff date, the first date.
We do? I thought we'd done that already. Okay.
I don't think so. And this is one of my moments that I think, speaking to earlier about the subtlety of the writing in the film, because there is that moment where Johnny and the friends show up in the car, and she says, "I don't want to go." And so you get that real serious class distinction between the two of them when they're talking about anything but that. And I love that portion of it where he says, you could go if you wanted. And she says, well, I didn't want to go. And he goes, it doesn't matter to me. And all of that has to do with class, but none of that is being spoken. I thought it was so great.
Yeah, it also made me think...
And this movie's about, but this movie's able to talk about class without ever mentioning it once. Not more directly than she's from the hills.
Right. And it's interesting. It's sort of interesting what, in terms of race and ethnicity, what Daniel stands in for, because conspicuously absent from this film, especially for a film set in this part of the world, is a Hispanic or Black community. Like, we just don't see them. But Daniel is their representative. Like an imperfect one, but that's basically what the movie's telling us. It's black hair and brown skin versus blonde hair and pale white skin.
Right.
And of course, you know, that's what the genius of Cobra Kai is, that what this movie leaves out in terms of representation, Cobra Kai puts back in.
Right.
Because it's feeding off the movie's interests with race and ethnicity, but doing it in a way that's actually diverse and representative. And I even think that
and just more direct.
Yeah, more direct. You know, more conducive to the times that we live in. I think this I've noted this passing cars moment as well, and again, this is a moment where I thought of the movie through the lens of Cobra Kai, and I thought, what a masterstroke to, by the time we get to Cobra Kai, Johnny and Daniel have swapped economic
roles.
Status.
It's amazing.
And I don't know if there's an exact an exact equivalent of this shot, but it immediately made me think of the pilot of Cobra Kai, where Johnny Lawrence's his car's all smashed up and it ends up in Daniel's garage, and Daniel's there, and he bumps into him for the first time, and they see each other after so many years, and they are the literal opposite of what they were in terms of what they are in this film. In this exact moment.
Well, and the other thing that show does that's so brilliant is, you know, that the idea of the Ed Asner character.
Yeah.
Ed Asner, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, one of his last roles.
Yeah. And just the idea that he wasn't his father, he was a stepfather, and could give a shit about him, but that's where the money came from. And so he, you know, the idea that this character could use it to his advantage in 1984, but not want anything to do with it in 2018 or whenever we started with Cobra Kai.
Yeah, that's
great.
Like, you know, the unintended, or, you know, intended but don't give a shit outcome of Reagan's America, isn't it? The white the white middle class or the white upper middle class get hit just as badly as the ethnic poor, and, you know, it all and then, you know, America just starts to backslide into poverty from all ends. Speaking of which, Country Club.
Yeah.
Again, this is speaking to your point. It's all about class.
Yeah.
But no one says a word about the subject. Daniel looking in through the kitchen. First of all, entering by the kitchen door.
Entering by the kitchen, you know.
That shot of him looking at the country club through the kitchen door.
Yeah.
I mean, it tells you everything about everyone's relationship to each other within the movie. And, you know, probably doesn't need to get covered in spaghetti to make the point, but it drives the point home.
I also wrote that it's literally the best use of Three's Company misunderstanding we've seen.
Well, it's also that misunderstanding is at least resolved fairly quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't drag on until the end of the movie.
Right.
We realize why they wrote a best friend for Ali, right?
Yeah.
Because so she could deliver this, so she could
that one line of information. Yes.
That shot also reminded me, and again, speaking to the 70s of it all, of the French Connection, the scene where where Popeye Doyle and whatever Roy Scheider's character's called are in the car staking out the gangsters who are in like a restaurant eating eating the most expensive food and wine, and they're stuck in their little cars freezing to death.
Freezing to yeah, exactly.
That's what I thought they were going for here as well. It's like, you know, look, you're the morally superior character, but well, I don't know about Popeye Doyle.
Well, and it's funny
technically,
because
outside of a 70s movie, he would be. And yet, you're
the one who's excluded
from the good things in life.
And that's the thing is like the pouring of the spaghetti on Daniel and the humiliation of that is the ultimate moment. But you know, this movie is really good at seeing the world through Daniel's eyes, and all the slights and all the worries and all the, you know, not fit inness that his character feels that you know, is far more universal than I think we thought at that time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because we all feel like that. And I think it's one of the reasons that the movie was probably so popular at the time was because it's done so well in the movie. And everybody could relate to it, no matter what socioeconomic or what color, race, creed, religion you are. We all feel left out at some point. And this movie hooks into that really well.
It doesn't seem
peppered throughout the movie.
It doesn't seem like a whole load of fun to be on the other side of things either.
Yeah, right.
Like Ali's, you know, when we meet her parents and they're complete hypocrites.
Yeah.
Because you know they're.
And you don't have to overdo that portion of the storyline.
Well, visually you get the point, right? I think that's where this movie plays it really well. Is like they up the visuals to an almost cartoonish point. So you know when the dad comes in and he's in workout gear with the neck towel,
the neck towel.
You know, it's like draw a affluent Beverly Hills person from the 80s kind of task. But in the scene itself, it's not as simple as, you know, you stay away from our daughter. You can't hang out with a guy like that. Like they're nice to his face, and then behind his back is like, and you know, behind the back they're like, are you sure? I'm just gonna do the white person thing of passively aggressively making you feel guilty for the choices you've made.
Right.
So again, like everything in the scene is nuanced, but the broad strokes are drawn so vividly.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
But again, it's because it's toggling back and forth between the, you know, the specific and the, you know, minutia of detail of character, and then the melodramatic. It's you know, it's able to go back and forth between the two.
Yeah. But it never feels it's not a kind of, sometimes that can feel really bloated, and this never feels that way.
Never for a second.
It's just there to make a point, essentially, isn't it? It's like when you see one of the Cobra Kai guys who's got bleach blonde eyebrows, and it's, you know, he looks like Rutger Hauer in an 80s cyborg movie, and the point visually, the point is it's like this is the exact opposite of Daniel. Like he is a completely different color to Daniel, but that's not where it ends. That's just where the dialogue starts, and that's what I appreciate about this movie. What I don't appreciate is Miyagi taunting Daniel by saying, "Are you some kind of girl?"
And giving him alcohol.
That attitude would be unwelcome now. I also don't like that moment because I have a horrible feeling it might have inspired the next Karate Kid. Like they thought back to that line, they were like, "No, we've got to redress the balance somehow. Let's make a whole movie just to deal with the problem of this one line."
It was one of the few moments that's just so 80s. Yeah. That it's just one of those things that you never would think of it. Like they just, you know, they think it literally, they just think of it as the best, funniest joke for that moment. They don't think of it as regressive as it is.
And they've got, you know, it also speaks to their ability to characterize well and not gloss over the flaws of the characters, even Miyagi.
Yeah,
because of course, you know, we're around about the scene in which we find him, you know, drunk, grieving over the loss of his wife, and you know that.
Well, because that comes right before all of this.
Yeah, but that's that's like the turn.
Did you notice, by the way? Did you notice in that scene where he's drunk and Daniel has to put him to bed, that at one point he tries pouring a drink from a bottle that has been unopened?
Yeah.
That's great.
Because it's like, so far, it's kind of the Yoda model. But, you know, this is as if in Empire or in Return of the Jedi, Yoda, we found Yoda like he'd been licking frogs all day or something, and Luke found him, and he was, he was he was bemoaning the fact
he was on a poisonous toad high.
He was bemoaning the fact that he ran a council that led the galaxy into fascism.
Yeah.
But we don't get that scene here. But we break down the archetype of the master, of the teacher, to show that he's human, he has flaws, he has trauma, he has a complicated past.
Yeah.
Without laying
and it's
any
probably
of that
what got
on
him
too
is. It's probably one of the things that went a long way towards his Oscar nomination for this movie.
Yeah.
And that's the only nomination for this movie, by the way.
Oh, okay. That's earned. Definitely.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
And then after the then we get into the crane what I've called the crane montage.
Yeah, that's what I called it too.
Which is great because it has Rocky in mind,
but it's different.
But it's also it's an inversion of that, right? Because the music is slow and melodic. There's hardly any movement. It's all about balance.
Balance, right?
And obviously, Rocky is about going as fast as possible. The music being as feel good as possible.
Yeah, Daniel on the bow of that ship, not ship, on the bow of that little rowboat. With the orange sun setting behind him is one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's a magic time, sunset moment.
And those god-awful panpipes.
Come on.
Oh, panpipes are my
Who doesn't like the panpipes in that moment?
Panpipes are my least favorite instrument, and yet I begrudgingly accept that they're perfect.
Of course, panpipes are your least favorite instrument.
But this is how much I like this film. I think it's one of those moments where a musical style you personally do not like can still be in a movie and you can still enjoy it because you know it's the right choice for the movie.
Yeah.
It's the last thing you want to hear, but it fits perfectly with what's happening, and it also, it makes it a sequence in its own right, not a Rocky knockoff.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Daniel's birthday.
And then just one more thing again to go ahead. To sort of consolidate that Rocky contrast. When Miyagi says you dance around too much, I think that's specifically they're poking. I think that's poking fun at Rocky.
You think that's direct?
Yeah, I think that's because it basically means the desired skill in Rocky becomes a vulnerability to Daniel here.
That's good.
And also at this point you begin to realize, well, not begin to realize, you realize from the start, but that Miyagi's more than just a surrogate parent to Daniel, because Daniel's missing a father and Miyagi's missing a son. So
yeah, right.
They're creating a family out of the leftover parts of their families.
And as the sequels will prove, Mom is irrelevant.
But you're
it's
right.
Just the two of them.
Yeah.
From now on.
From now on, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that with the little screen time we have with her, she's developed in a way that is very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But to the point of Daniel's birthday, and when he gets his presents and he's in the car, he's got that he gets the gift of the car. Mm-hmm. It's so earned to me in a movie, by the way, that I believe comes in just under 2 hours.
Yeah.
Lesson not learned for the next movie. It's so earned when he says, "You're the best friend I've ever had." I believe it, and it seems real.
All they had to do to get under 2 hours was to cut out the beginning of Karate Kid Part 2.
That's true.
Which doesn't look like it belongs in that movie either. All you're saying is absolutely true. Like, it's an earned moment for the character, but the way it's situated in the movie, going back to the idea of it being a modern day frontier story, this is the rite of passage for the Eastern settler. He now has his own transport,
right?
And they've updated the imagery so it's like a classic mid-century car, but it's a covered wagon. You know,
Right.
that's clearly
Yeah.
what's going on here. And also, I guess the inference of Happy Days
Yeah, maybe.
with isn't Rock Around, can't we hear Rock Around the Clock briefly as well when they're in the car?
Oh, do we?
Because most people would know Pat Morita through Happy Days at this
Yeah.
point. So I think there's at least a little bit of play to that. I completely forgot. We're getting into the tournament section now. I completely forgot Miyagi cheated his way into this tournament.
Oh, I didn't. I remember that completely. It's one of my favorite parts.
Oh, it's beautiful. There's that slide.
I
of
love
hand
him
he does
stealing
with
that black belt.
stealing the black belt. And then after that,
And I also love that the cover for stealing the belt is him saying this is this is an auditory thing.
yeah,
Not a written on pen, like pencil to paper thing. He says it's Miyagi, not Miyagi.
yeah. And then there's the whole translator ruse with using
Yes.
the white people's ignorance of Japanese Americans to
Oh,
exploit,
I guess that would be all right.
yeah, to exploit the system that they've created. It's a great outsider.
Yeah.
Both those moments are great. Sort of it's the outsider manipulating the system to their own ends, and it's the real kind of cheer moments.
And obviously there's a taking the last sort of moment for Pat Morita and his manner of speak that we've been talking about throughout the episode, because it's his final button, and a great one. When the man who can't speak English, the white man says thank you, he says welcome, and then walks off.
God,
so good.
Morita had to like, this is like a Russian doll kind of thing that
right.
he had to play someone who didn't know English
Yeah,
but knew English
right.
better than this guy he's pretending to be.
Yeah.
And this is where the movie goes into, and I have no problem with this. It's pure movie sport at this time, right? Stuff that doesn't really happen in sport, but happens in sports movies. Daniel's ability to go straight from competition virgin to title contender in a matter of minutes.
He's literally running out of, off the mat.
Yeah.
In the first moments of his first match. And then all we need for him to become a contender is the song. Basically,
that's it. I was going to say it's sort of like via the medium of montage.
Yes.
He becomes a title
through
contender.
80s montage. He becomes great.
What's great?
I want to say this too, because we haven't talked about this yet. And in juxtaposition to the other movie, the 2010, I want to say, that this movie seems over and over and over again, when it's required to have a needle drop song, that they pick the right song.
Yes, absolutely.
And, You're the Best Around is, of course, known throughout the land as one of the great montage songs. I mean, who doesn't love it?
But it's also interesting that, I don't know, it would be easy to misremember this as being Daniel's theme. But it's kind of it's everyone's theme, right? It's showing Daniel progressing to the finals and Johnny simultaneously. So it's like, who does this music really belong to?
Now,
and that's the great thing about this sequence, is that even though Johnny is the villain of the piece, at least at this point, or he's he's a henchman, I guess, archetypally. Like, the movie gives him the dignity to showcase his skills as well as his aggression. Like, you see him gracefully winning games, winning matches, not just doing it through brute force.
Yeah.
And that makes the moment later on where Kreese tells him, tells firstly his predecessor to sweep the leg, and then tells him, just do him dirty, basically. You see that an athlete like Johnny, and with the skill that he has, to be asked to do that is beneath him.
Yes,
and that's a big part of what that montage is, as well as obviously getting Daniel from the point of being of not being able to win to being close, being within a hair's breadth of winning.
Well, and I like that they set it up too. One thing I really enjoyed watching this time around was seeing character development down to the smallest characters, because I think it's Bobby.
Yeah.
Bobby is the one that puts Daniel out of the tournament momentarily. But Bobby's also the one that told Johnny he'd had enough right before Miyagi kicked all their asses. It's Bobby that tells Kreese, hey, I can beat this guy. But of course, the adult is staring you down, and you're going to, as a teenager, you have to do what you're told. So then he hurts Daniel. But the first thing he does, he's like literally on top of him saying, I'm sorry. And so there's a lot of care taken to have, character development down to that small of a character, which I think is great for this film.
And it lands better because you've already established the archetype. You've got the broad strokes of that they're part of the villain's team. And so when you see that change, you see that character development happen, it lands more strongly, I think.
Yeah.
Than if it had been wishy-washy from the beginning as to whether they were with Kreese or whether they're secretly sympathetic to Daniel. Like,
right.
Yeah, actually that complexity would hurt the story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah. I want to ask you this, because there's something interesting happening throughout this montage in which you're seeing a slew of different people, many of whom we haven't ever met.
Yeah.
At different karate levels, all working towards the same goal. They want to win the championship. And the one thing I think this movie does really well, like you said, Avildsen is not doing a lot of Jason Bourne kind of editing.
No.
We're watching the actual fights happen, and I think Zabka and Macchio are doing really good work. They never look completely out of their depths or anything like that within the karate,
except when they're supposed
to.
Except when they're narratively supposed to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But there is one character, the Vidal character, who's the other semifinalist that Johnny beats, who clearly looks far and away like the best karate student out of anybody there. And that's because he literally was.
Yeah.
He was so good that Avildsen let him choreograph his own fights.
Wow.
And every time I watch this movie, I do always think that guy's the best. Now, he has a great fight between Johnny, and Zabka's really, he's working it in that last fight.
Right.
But do you ever have that thought when you're watching this movie that the movie magic is happening a little bit? That we have to disregard how good that guy is?
Oh yeah,
because our two white guys have to be in the finals.
This whole set piece is about total suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, right.
But again, within the context of a sports movie where this is part of, and again the context of Rocky, this outsider who someone makes a typo and he's fighting the champion of the world, and it kind of feels like the same thing's going on here. So it's all about suspension of disbelief and whether you buy into it or you don't, and that depends on how well it's executed, and it's executed thoroughly, and having such skillful sport or martial arts on display, I think just adds to it. It's part of the spectacle at this point. But they've got a lot of ground to cover to get Daniel to the final, and you have to just.
But what I do like is
something they do which is quite good is that they show his side breaking the rules as much as Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
To get what they want, which is interesting because, you would expect it to be me. Well, I mean, he cheated his way into the competition, so I suppose not. But you would expect them to err on the side of honor and respect, but they're actually willing to get down and dirty when they need to, because they're representing the little guy as opposed to the sort of Reaganite machine of Cobra Kai.
Sure. Well, not just that, but one thing I noticed throughout the tournament this time was, and this might be the benefit of having watched all of Cobra Kai too, was this idea of defense first.
Yeah.
And that, we're not going to get to fights to the death till the next movie. So in this one, the defense can bring your points.
Yeah.
I like that Daniel has a moment against this one great villain from Cobra Kai, the guy who screams it must be take a worm out for a walk week or something like that, And he's a great villain because he's the one guy on Cobra Kai who's relishing every terrible thing that they're doing. Yeah. He's always on the side. He's like, yeah! He has this terrible sort of shriek of pleasure in watching people get hurt. But when Daniel has his match against him, Daniel just kind of gets a punch to the chest for a final point, and the guy was really surprised by it and then super pissed about it. And so I had this sense of a single point coming, because I think Miyagi says, learn your defense, points will come.
Yeah.
And so you have that sense that he might not be the best karate kid there, but he has enough discipline and enough knowledge to get what he needs to win, and that's it.
Yeah, and we're back on the realism tightrope because it's give and take. Exactly what you're saying is right. Like there's a lot of close calls, which helps the realism, even though you got to suspend disbelief that Daniel could get anywhere near the final. You can at least go, okay, well, there were some close calls. It's very tight. Also, when we get to the moment where he has the injury, and then they say over the announcement, Daniel has 15 minutes to do it, and we'll talk about this in relation to the next movie because it's a different timing in the next movie.
It is, and
there's something very John G. Avildsen about 15 minutes. It's like, this is the most plausible amount of time I can allow for this magical,
mysticism to occur.
This magical fixing of the leg to take place. Yeah. Like 15 minutes feels about as far as people will accept.
Yeah,
and it's full of that give and take. But you're also aware that you're in a movie where you're kind of, you're cheering on your hero to success.
Your hero, and by the time you get to the end of it, by the time, Daniel's going to hop out to a quick 2-0 lead.
Yeah.
Which I don't think happens very often in a movie like this. And then Johnny comes back rather quickly, and the next thing you know, we're tied 2-2. Johnny should have won the tournament nearly as I could see, because he did get a final punch to the face that put Daniel down, and the referee just says, that's no point. And I kept thinking, why not?
Yeah.
But that leads to the crane kick. Yeah. But that leads to the crane kick.
Yeah.
And again, it's like Avildsen in frame showing not just the two boys. We're not going to cut to their faces. We're not going to cut to, a kind of Western standoff. It's like where you have everything, including the crowd, the referee in frame. And by the time he gets that final kick, and by the time he wins, and Johnny brings the trophy to him, and the soaring music, to me, it's kind of, I don't know how you can not be won over by the movie in that moment. By the time we're getting to Pat Morita's shining face as Miyagi, just staring at Daniel with pride.
Yeah,
you have to love it. I don't know how you can not love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the film is kind of creating its own iconography at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, these images will carry through to, like, even the last season of Cobra Kai refers back to these final images, final images in this movie. And yeah, it's the stakes are really high, but they find a way to make it work where it feels almost plausible.
Mm-hmm.
So, again,
and then filmatically, it becomes iconic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so they were doing something right.
Absolutely. And again, I think, this can be contrasted with the 2010 version. It's like,
well, and I want to bring, because we'll get there when we get there, but
not relying on the spectacle of sport to carry you through, like actually having to
Right.
do storytelling that the audience can buy into in those moments, not simply the event itself. And it's kind of interesting, like, I wonder, because we talked about Rocky Balboa and how basically the game is just how it would look on HBO. Like, it's just, and that really works for that movie. And I think they try to do it again in Karate Kid 2010, and it fails miserably. But maybe with this material, you have to go in this direction to make it work. But I think it's a.
Well, you can. I have lots of notes about the difference between directors.
Sure.
Between these two films, and
also,
I think it's as simple as, maybe you don't have to do it like this film, but at least Avildsen knows what to do.
Well, and also
he has at least one answer.
And and again, the model is Rocky, so Daniel's like down and out before his final. Well, Rocky 2, I suppose, down and out before the comeback, and then it becomes a matter of is he going to be the best loser, a la Rocky, or are we going to let Daniel have a happy ending and against all odds take the trophy? And they let him take the trophy,
and because you have Rocky, and because you in this movie you have Miyagi saying things like win or lose, it doesn't matter. And because, like I said, because you have Rocky and Avildsen having directed it, I think you have enough information there to not know for sure what's going to happen.
And again, calling back to the crane, and so that changing the significance of that and what that means and how important that move is.
Right.
It's not sort of pulling any last minute surprises out of its ass.
No.
It all feels intentional, deliberate, established where this movie's going. And
it actually feels like the only thing that was supposed to happen,
Right, and it's a satisfying ending.
Right.
That just has to take some shortcuts that all sports movies do. And that's part of the pleasure of the genre. So I think it all works together very well, but one inch off in neither direction, it would have been horrible.
Credit check?
Sure. Yahoo number 1 and Yahoo number 2. Those are the names of those two racist guys.
Sounds about right.
They don't even get descriptive hick names. They are literally archetypes. There's a character credited as Chicken Boy, who's the guy dressed as the chicken at the Halloween party.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's helping the actor swallow the pill of not being seen outside of a chicken costume in the entire movie to be credited thus. Here's a couple.
Maybe they got him walking down a hallway.
Yeah. Couple of credits here: Boom Man and Cable Man. For all the good work with ethnicity, race, and class, still a way to go with gender equality, at least where the credits are concerned.
There you go.
Karate tournament consultant. So how does this guy feel about Miyagi cheating the system and the Deus Ex Machina of the
maybe it was his idea. Maybe it's like, if you're gonna cheat a tournament,
here's how you would do it. Yeah, like those cat burglars who become security consultants.
Yeah.
Physical trainers for Machio and Marita. Body by Jake.
Hey, all right.
The same trainer that brought us Harrison Ford's torso in 1984's Temple of Doom.
There you go.
Yeah,
So we know he's good.
Yeah, Jake is the difference between Return of the Jedi, Han Solo, and Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones. There's a band on the soundtrack called Commuter.
All right.
Which is both adhering to the laws of naming a power ballad group and also falling way short of the standard. There's like one word, single image, but commuter of all things. It's interesting if you go online and Google search the band Commuter, the first thing that comes up is, why can't I find information about the band Commuter? That's like the number one search term. And that's helpful when you're doing a Google search, because then you know the search is over, right? I can never get past
I'm never going to get as far as I want.
That tells me that the search is over.
That's good.
I think we talked about this when we did the sequels, but that disclaimer about the DC Comics version of the Karate Kid.
Oh yeah,
comes
right.
up in all these movies. Now, I just want to add that I think that this is a multiverse opportunity going begging.
I think I've had enough multiverse for a while.
I think the next Flash movie needs to be like Michael Keaton's Batman and Ralph Macchio's Karate Kid.
The fight we never asked for but always wanted.
Exactly. And I like the fact that the credits disappear and the music continues and then it fades out. So the end credits are adhering to the laws of 80s pop music, not those of cinema credits.
There you go.
And I'm done.
All right. Well, let's do our inversion.
Oh yeah. Well, this probably comes as no surprise.
I don't think it's going to be too hard for people to figure out. Is Karate Kid a good movie?
Yes, it's a very good movie.
It's still a good movie.
Well,
and do you put it at the top of the list?
Yeah, absolutely.
By far.
By far. Although I will say, and it's not fair to compare the two because they're in different media, but this movie...
That's an important question. What's better in your mind, Karate Kid or
Cobra Kai?
Cobra Kai.
I think the best of karate, the best moments of Cobra Kai are on the par with the best moments of Karate Kid.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best. There's not one I prefer more. It's hard. I mean, you know, then you get into the area of one could exist without the other, right? So so only one could exist without the other. So Cobra Kai cannot exist without Karate Kid, but Karate Kid doesn't need Cobra Kai. So if you look at it at that level, this is more important. Right. In terms of quality, though, I honestly think it's a tie.
Yeah.
But again, it's that the complementary thing. They work so well together that they're almost indistinguishable.
Yeah, I agree with you on all counts.
But this was, I don't know, yeah, it's like just surprisingly complex, which is, I mean, that's a backhanded compliment, right? Because that means that you're going into it thinking it's going to be superficial, which I wasn't.
After having seen it several times.
Yeah,
you know?
But I did. Yeah, I don't think I ever paid attention to how deep the storytelling goes.
It's funny because after having done the sequels with you and watching all of Cobra Kai, I think I was expecting this to diminish a little bit.
And it really doesn't.
For me, and it didn't. I mean, I even found more to like.
I agree. I've had exactly the same experience.
So good on you, Karate Kid from '84. You know,
and it doesn't. It's you know, it's one of those originals where it feels like everything is set in place. It doesn't. You know, sometimes you can go back to the original movie, and if a mythology is expanded exponentially since then, it can feel like a kind of more of a blueprint, more like a pilot, even. And it doesn't feel like that. It holds together as one film so well.
I think so too.
It gives space for other installments of the franchise for sure. Some of which they took advantage of, and others that they didn't. But it's absolutely a movie that could exist perfectly well without a sequel. It's that strong. It's that tight. It's that tightly bound movie that can just exist on its own, but is good enough and rich enough to precipitate more.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think Cobra Kai proves what you could do.
Yeah.
With it. Far more than the sequels themselves do. You know, I think the sequels, they all fall short of of how good this movie is. But for me, it's a sliding scale that just keep kind of getting worse and worse. You have this outlier where you like 3, but I think they all kind of have something to like within them. No matter whether you think that they're good movies or bad movies, there's still at least something there. And I think Cobra Kai kind of proves that they, you could take something that people didn't think worked and turn it into something that works. So that says something about the original ideas.
Yeah, the ingredients are great. I mean, that's the thing. It's but you have to cook them properly.
And it's all born out of this. I mean, those ingredients are all born out of this first thing. So.
But it's also, if you get the seasoning to go with the, ingredients analogy, if you get the seasoning wrong, you end up with the next Karate Kid. It's just...
I'll say. You get Michael Ironside.
Well,
at a boarding school of some sort.
He might be the saving grace of that movie, but
he might. Yeah, you're right. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you. This is your $5 episode for joining the Patreon. You're gonna have to tell us what you think about the Karate Kid.
You paid us $5 for us both to enjoy a movie that we already enjoyed, but now enjoy far more. So really, we should be paying all of you $5.
Shh! Shut up, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the guy on the marketing course told me not to say that. Sorry.
You're gonna have to find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com or leave a comment on the Patreon. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. If you're paying $10, coming up next, The Karate Kid from 2010. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
To make honey, young bee need young flower, not old prune.
Good stuff.
As true today as it was in 1984. I don't know. That doesn't feel right either. Also, that's very early on in their relationship to be essentially talking about Daniel's mating practices.
His fucking. On that note, so long, everybody.